Hello and welcome to Cards and Coaching. In my first video, I was explaining the differences between constellations made with an inner family system or with a family. And I would like to go a little bit further into the inner family system to better explain how we can imagine those parts of personality, how we can understand how something like that is working. I'm going to try to give you an image of it, and everyone has his or her own way to work with them or how to imagine the whole team that goes on inside of us. So first of all, let me pick up a certain word. We very often have that problem that the word ego is seen in a very negative way, especially the esoterical part gives this a very bad touch in a certain way. And ego is Greek and simply means I. But we are not really I. We are not really one person as a whole. And Isabel Padovani explained this and said we are innes, which means we. Inside of us, we have different aspects, different beliefs, inner beliefs, which doesn't have anything to do with religious beliefs, or necessarily doesn't have anything to do with religious belief. And they try to find a way for us to live in a way that is best for us, best with our knowledge that we have at that moment being. So actually, we have a lot of decisions that we take every day, or choices we make, and a lot of them don't seem to be important in a certain way, but some can be very traumatic. So if you are invited over to a person and you like beer and he's asking you whether you want to have a glass of wine or a glass of beer, you may not be thinking about it, but you say, well, give me a glass of beer. But sometimes we end up in a situation where the choice is much deeper, and that is the moment where we end up in conflicts. Let's say, for example, even in our time today, there is a woman who was married who stopped working because she was caring for the kids, and she finds out that she is in a situation where she's in an abusive relationship, and she will be struggling with the decision whether to stay because there is a certain safety and maybe a certain safety for the kids, that she has a home to live in, a roof over her head, or if she should leave that relationship which is abusive and which is not safe for herself or maybe even for the kids, and to end up, well, as we say, under the bridge, without a home, without a place to keep them safe later on. So there are a lot of things like that where we might end up in struggles later on, and we might end up in a dilemma. So in psychology, you very often find this idea of tetralemma, which means that there might be something else, another choice than the two that we see in the beginning. But what is the most important for the beginning is to understand that there are two parts inside of us that are, well, fighting and arguing against each other, because that voice that tells that woman to stay because she has a home at that moment to return to is a voice that has an argument that has a certain weight. And the other part that says you have to leave because this is actually not a safe place anymore, not for yourself, not for your kids, has also an argument. And maybe for someone who is in the outside, it seems easy to say, well, leave, because this is not going to end up well. But for the person who is inside of the situation, this might be very difficult. And so you end up with two different parts being in an argumentation, being in a fight, in a quarrel, we end up to be in a struggle with that inner conflict. So this is a first step into that direction of using an inner family system as a constellation process. In NLP, for example, we made it with 2 seats. So you first sit in one seat that was anchored as one part of the struggle, one voice of the struggle, and the second seat that was anchored with the second part of that struggle. I, for example, at that moment was taking a class which I absolutely wanted to finish because I thought it was interesting. That was in the beginning, but the person who held the class was very aggressive, and I didn't want to stay in that situation anymore. And during this exercise, let me find out that actually there was a reason behind the reason of that part that wanted to stay. Because it actually didn't want to stay because I wanted to be in that class. So, hello again, my old lady. But because during my adolescence and during my being raised by my parents, I very often stopped something, didn't finish it until the bitter end, actually, because my parents both believed that I would finish school and then I would get a job and I would stay at that job for the rest of my life. And I actually didn't finish school. I became sick and I stopped school. And later on, I got a job. Well, after 10 years, my boss, he left, so I couldn't end up and staying there until the rest of my life, or until the end of my life in a certain way. And so this feeling of failure came up, and that was the real reason why I didn't want to leave this class. And I thought that for once I should prove people that I could stay somewhere until the, well, actually bitter end. And because of this exercise, I found out that the voice telling me that my safety and my sanity actually went first and was more important, was very, well, became bigger and became stronger. And so I left that class. But the class, the NLP class actually, where I made this exercise, I finished it completely. It wasn't a bitter end because it was amazing. And that way I could find out that it was a good feeling if it felt correct and if I felt welcomed and if I felt safe in a certain way to learn something there without being in that stress that I had to please the person who kept the classes, who taught us something, the teacher. So I had this way of working also with my cards. And I will give you a small example also with the cards that I use there. I have shown this example already in a different video, but I will pick it up here again just to explain to you how two voices may be in our heads in a certain way, and not in the way, please don't get me wrong, this isn't schizophrenia where you hear voices and they are telling you to do something bad, but just your own thoughts becoming hearable in a certain way and becoming visual in a certain way as a kind of persons, and so far called parts of personality, and they are very real inside of us. And I want to do those videos amongst others to explain to people to take those voices and those arguments, please take them seriously because they are telling you something about yourself and may help you out of a struggle that you are in, that you might not see in the beginning, but it becomes stronger and stronger and the voices become louder and louder because the problem is there and you live in a situation you do not feel well about. So when I started with the cards, I didn't have the row at that moment. And this was one of the readings I had at this moment. There was a friend of mine who met two women, and he was wondering which one would be the right one to start a relationship with. And the goat is a card that shows that a person is so much under pressure that he's retrieving, while the card with the serpent with the eyes on it shows that the person has to care about other ones and is losing himself in it. So actually he had those two voices in him, because he liked both people at that moment, both women, and he imagined a relationship to care for someone. So the idea of caring, that showed the snake, was inside of him, and the voice told him that a relationship is about caring for someone else. And on the other hand, there was a voice that also told him that it was important to have a certain part and a certain place for himself, which came up with a goat. And this was the dilemma he was in. And the tetralemma, so this idea of it may be not one of the two, or maybe both together, or maybe something else entirely, was the bison, and that one was explaining with the arrows. It was explaining that actually it was important to have a exchange between both, between caring and having space for himself and being cared for. So just explaining the cards to him, he came up with the idea and said, actually, I shouldn't take any of them. I shouldn't choose any of them, but wait for the correct person to arrive in my life. And this explains a little bit how you can imagine already a first idea of how those parts work. So the moment the two parts inside of him were communicating, even without much help, just with the idea of the cards, with the message of the cards, he came up. It was as if both parts decided. So decision means there is an incision, there's a split inside, and a decision puts those two together again in the idea that both parts have an equal right to be there and need to be nourished in a certain way, both of them. And this is what happens in our lives. It is important that the moment we are really in a struggle, not those small decisions that we take all day, or that the choices that we make all day. As I said, for example, do you want coffee in the morning, or do you want a glass of water? And you say, well, I can have both, or something like that, and you don't think about it for a long time. But the things that really make us struggle, to take the time and to listen to both of them. So what I explained there as an example is that there may be two parts of personality that begin this inner conflict and this inner argumentation. But, well, actually there can be more parts. Either they are going to come up as you go along and work with the two parts, or from the beginning on you find out that you have the feeling that there are many aspects coming up, many arguments and ideas that come up and don't seem to be fitting together. And at that moment, it might be helpful if we pick up a different way to work with this. And the transaction analysis, for example, is one of the ideas that I like very much, and I will explain it a little bit further. And the second part is there is a book called Romancing the Shadow from Steve Wolf and Connie Zweig, who explain it as the Arthurian table. So imagine that you have a round table, and all those parts that have an idea of how something would be good for you, they all have the right to say something, but you are the one on the throne. You listen to all of them, but you have to take the decision how it is being done later on, or what kind of choice you are going to make later on. And so you can also use both together, and the moment you understand the transaction analysis, the moment you find out about the transaction analysis, maybe you want to put them later on onto a kind of round table in your imagination, or using the cards as a constellation system, a constellation tool. But first of all, I would like to explain the different parts of personality in a transaction analysis. I will explain the different parts and also concerning information that you find on the internet today, where to pay attention to, and maybe stick to what I'm going to offer out of the simple reason that what I'm talking about is out of experience, and I will also explain why the other things out of experience do not work. So actually in the transaction analysis you have different ego states, and the first ones I want to explain to you are the parental ego states. So actually this has a lot to do as we go along, as we grow up, the way our parents show up in our life. So we have an ego state, a parental fatherly ego state. I'm not sure if it is visible. Which shows us certain norms that we try to go along with. Which doesn't mean that it is something bad. It gives us a certain kind of judgment. What is important concerning our inner parts of personality and what people learn with the time they are working with it is that we have the possibility to judge a situation, but we get into an inner conflict the moment we start judging people, because either we are judging ourselves or we are going to judge people from the outside, and then normally it's a projection. We also have the caring part, which is the parental state, the maternal parental state. Again, there are always extremes. So if it is a well-balanced one, you will find out that your maternal inner maternal part is the one that pays attention, that you feel well, that you take care of yourself. The same way, if you project it to the outside because it is not balanced, then you take care of things that might not be your business. In our inner side, we have um, a free child. The free child is actually the part we start with. That's the one that is not judging, that tries to find out things just for the fun of finding out things, that wants to learn. And actually, that is the first part I want to warn about. Not the free child itself, but very often we read the information about what they call an inner child. And that is exactly how they explain it. But the problem is that actually they are treating this inner child from the parental ego states. So they are actually judging the inner part and judging the outside who is not nice to their inner part. And that is not a very good way to handle the situation. During our evolution, becoming a grown up and becoming, well, being a child and becoming an adolescent, there are two other child parts that are evolving and developing. One is the one that tries to, so now I have lost the word again. I don't believe it. I'm a little bit tired. Um, the adaptive child, there it is again. The adaptive child. So that is the part that is adapting, and that gives us the possibility also to adapt to rules and laws. So that is what we learn from our parents, that there are rules that we shouldn't break, and that is a way that we can adapt into a society, into a system. And it is very important that all this is in a balance. So if we are only living in this adaptive feeling, we end up not taking care enough of ourselves. So it is a way that all those parts have to play together. And then actually we have the rebel child. Wait a second, let me put this. It's not very clear, but maybe you can read it. The rebel child is the one that may go against the law, but it doesn't. Again, it is important to understand that it is not going against the law necessarily just to spite someone, but because it wants to make its own experiences. And it helps us evolving or developing another part that is very important. It is the adult part. The adult part is actually the neutral one. That is the one that brings all of them together. You could say that if you put them onto the idea of the Arthurian table, then that is King Arthur. So again, the A, it is the king. It is the part that is on the throne, and it has to bring all the decisions from all those parts, all the information together, so that every part has been taken care of and that we are well balanced inside. From here on, I would like to give a first idea of how this can work with tarot. So in a normal reading, where a person is bringing up a problem, and maybe we are first of all trying to get a better idea of the situation itself and trying to get an objective look at the situation, we might end up, for example, with person cards, so with the court cards, and they can already give us an information of an inner part of ourselves. So I have developed a list concerning the different parts, the different court cards that you also find in my group. I will put the link down later on so you can go for that one. And for example, the inner parts concerning the adaptive child ends up with the pages, always in the two directions. So either it is well balanced or not. And the element shows us if it has something to do with its emotions, for example, or if it has something to do with his actions, or with his thoughts, for example. So his or her, however you feel, that part has something to do with yourself. So it is not that an adaptive child has to be female, or that inside of you, or that you have to sense it as a female part or as a male part. Also concerning yourself being a man or a woman, or however you feel, doesn't have anything to do with it. If you work with this, that simply the images come. How do you sense that part inside of you? Is it maybe, has it a more female touch or a more male touch? Check all those things. It might give you an insight, a better insight of what this part wants from you, or what that part is doing inside of you. So the pages normally turn up as the adaptive child. The rebel child seems to be logical in a certain way, is normally the knight, because that is a lot about making the own experiences, and the rebel child wants to make those own experiences on all the bases. He wants to find out about his own emotions, as well as take his own actions without being underlying all kind of rules. So those two together give a certain balance in how to make your own experiences without breaking too many rules in a certain way. Our parental ego states are shown by queens and by kings. So there again, the caring one is the queen, but maybe she's just taking a look in someone else's cup. So you find those two again in the balance of caring for yourself or minding someone else's business. And the kings too, then again, are actually the parental ego state. Again, sometimes because of the situations we have grown up to, or the images we have, maybe they don't turn up as a female or a male person, but they have male or female aspect, personality, even if we see them in a different way. As you can see, there are two missing, and those are the two that go out of that typical balance between balanced or unbalanced. So one of them is the free child. So either the free child is locked away or it is there, but there is no typical unbalanced free child. So the best card to show that one is the Fool. And the adult one same way, either it has been developed or it didn't develop because it didn't have the place to develop, because maybe the person was so much into adapting the whole time through that it didn't have the possibility to find his own experiences and developing an adult ego state. So the magician is perfect as a card for this. So you can use them, for example, for a spread if that is what you want to do. But out of that spread, I would like to invite you with the next video to show you actually what is the difference between cards lying down in a spread and putting them and facing each other. What this will do to the cards and what this actually will do to people. Out of the experience, maybe also with an example, and later on in the next video I will try and build up an example as I have experienced it with people to make you maybe understand even better how you can work with the cards in a constellation. As always, thank you for listening. Thank you for checking my video.